This is Sam.
Thanks, Kim. My name's Sam Duncan, and I'm here to talk to you about a topic I think, I hope is familiar to you all, sleep. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a sleep specialist. My background is actually supply chain management and logistics. Sounds really exciting, doesn't it? Yeah. I first came across the topic a few months ago when a few procedures came across my desk relating to accommodation, believe it or not. You see, our transportation workers require a certain standard of accommodation. Why is that? Well, they need a certain quality of sleep to be able to perform the next day in their transportation capacities, I guess. Which got me thinking, what quality of sleep did they need? Was this just a shonk to get a night in a 5-star hotel in town? Was there an actual reason behind this? So I started looking into the science behind it, and started looking at a few of the studies surrounding sleep and fatigue. Sure enough, I came across a few, and I'll talk to you about them today. I guess one of the interesting things I started looking at first of all is why we sleep. There are many reasons, and again, I'm not a doctor or a sleep specialist, so I won't go into the science behind them, but I have chosen one because I have the most slides on it. Way too many theories. And that's this one. One of the reasons we sleep is to repair the damage caused by these guys. These guys are free radicals. Now, there's a few things here, there's a few sciencey things, covalent bonds, etc., but I'll give you, I guess, a real-life sort of example. The faster your metabolism, the more free radicals you have. And the more free radicals you have, the more you sleep. Let's take small creatures, for example. Most small creatures have a relatively fast metabolism, a lot of free radicals, and sleep quite often. This fierce creature, for example, our budgie, he gets very, very grumpy if he doesn't get 12 hours sleep a night. In fact, have you guys seen the movie Gremlins? You know what happens to the gremlins after they get fed after 12? That's actually based on this guy. At the other end of the spectrum, these guys. Where's the oceanographer? There we go. These are sperm whales sleeping, actually. There's a very rare photo, apparently. They don't catch them sleeping very often, probably because they only sleep for half an hour a day. So, I guess that those are the reasons why, but where I fit in is, I guess, we look at the performance between sleep and fatigue. So, how much sleep you need one day, and how that impacts on your performance the next day. As I said, there's a couple of studies on this, but before I go into the studies, I'll talk about a couple of the definitions that will probably, I guess, add to the lingo behind some of the studies I'll talk about. So the first one is a psychomotor vigilance test. A psychomotor vigilance test, it's probably not what you're thinking if you're thinking about the 1962 film Motor Psycho by Russ Meyer, 5.7 on IMDb. A psychomotor vigilance test is actually this. You were first, Alex. I'll give you a prize later. Anyway, so it's basically it's a reaction speed test. The room's gone completely red, which is interesting. It's basically a reaction speed test. It's used quite a lot in the sleep studies because it's a really objective indication of your performance level. You can repeat it over and over again, and it's really hard to learn because it's completely random. So you do these, I guess, over and over again for about 10 minutes, and you get a psychomotor reaction test score, or PVT score. The other definition I'll give you is circadian rhythm. You've probably heard of it, so I won't go too much into the science behind it. And I guess probably none of you are thinking what I first thought when I heard circadian rhythm, which was Circadian Rhythm, which is a circadian rhythm band. The circadian rhythm is actually, it's kind of like your body clock. It regulates or dictates the release of chemicals that regulate your sleep and awake stages. For the purposes of these studies, it's probably important to convey that the urge to sleep is greatest at 2 a.m. in the morning, and then again, strangely, at 2 p.m. at night. And that's actually a really important, I guess, point for our transportation workers. For people like aircrew, pilots, for example, they get their circadian rhythm gets messed with all the time because they're flying overseas. They're trying to sleep when it's light. Light is also a big factor here, and it gets really, really messy. And we have a lot of regulations in the airline industry, at least, surrounding aircrew rest and particularly overseas. So I've been through the lingo now. I guess I'll go into a couple of the studies. First up, the first one is a University of Pennsylvania study which looked at sleep debt. Sleep debt is the accumulation of a lack of sleep over the course of a week, which sounds really bad when I say it like that. And it's basically, it comes, I guess a good example is if you've had 6 hours sleep for the last 4 nights, and you normally need 8.5 hours sleep, you're probably suffering from some sleep debt. It accumulates at a rate of roughly 30 minutes for every hour you're awake. So, the rough rule is if you've been awake for 16 hours, you need about 8 hours sleep. Pretty standard. I love graphs, so I will apologise in advance, and I'll skip through them at the end. Here's a shot of my own sleep debt. You can see this is pretty indicative of someone who does shift work. So at the beginning of the week, I've stayed up for about 22 hours because I've woken up, stayed up during the day, and then I haven't started till midnight or so. Get back home and then sleep for about 6 hours because my circadian rhythm's been messed with. I'm trying to sleep during the day, and then I wake up again, go to work, and so on and so forth, until right at the end when I sort of hit a real low in my sleep debt. And fortunately, the weekend comes along, I get some sleep, and I'm back to sort of normal. So this is what these UPenn studies looked at. The studies one of the key studies took three groups of individuals and sleep deprived them over the course of 2 weeks. The first group got 4 hours sleep, the second group got 6 hours sleep, and the third group got 8 hours sleep. And these are the results. It was really interesting. A few things I'll highlight here. Again, a graph. I do apologise. A few things here. That top graph there and this is all, I guess, PVT is on the far left, and that's their performance. And then you've got days on the bottom axis, up to 2 weeks. See, the group at the top is the group who got 4 hours sleep, group in the middle 6, and obviously the group at the bottom 8. The group I would really not like to be the group who got 4 hours sleep, particularly by day 7 when it really started to show. And it's interesting because even the group that only got 8 hours sleep still suffered at the end of the 2 weeks. Now we can hypothesize and say this is probably because they weren't getting their optimal amount of sleep. And also, if you're in bed for 8 hours, it doesn't necessarily mean you're sleeping for 8 hours as well. So a few of the results, well, obviously we saw a decrease in reaction speed over that time. A corresponding, and I guess we equate that to a decrease in performance overall. The interesting thing, and I mean, don't lose hope here, because one of the other studies showed that at the end of all of this, it only took 2 nights of the group's optimum level of sleep to get over the sleep debt. So let's say that group who got 4 hours sleep a night, they would have accumulated around about 50 something hours sleep debt. They only needed 2 nights sleep of 8.5 hours, 9 hours, whatever their optimum level of sleep was, to get completely over their sleep debt, which is pretty good. I mean, and that's, for me, it kind of highlights that weekends are great for sleep. The other study I'll look at is more of a short-term study. It was a UNSW study done on sleep deprivation. I say short-term because it was over the course of just a single day. It was basically sleep deprivation over 24 hours, and the impact on performance. So I'll go into it in a sec, but it built on some science done by another professor from the University of South Australia, who's seen as, I guess, one of the lead researchers in this field, and he's Australian, which is pretty cool. I really like that. So the study itself took a group of truck drivers, transport workers, locked them in a room, got them drunk, and sleep deprived them. Why did it get them drunk? Well, it used alcohol as, I guess, a comparison between for performance measures. I mean, we all know what 0.05 feels like, and maybe a little bit further. And we all know sort of that there is an impact on our performance if we drink. And so this was trying to equate that performance that we feel to a number of hours awake. I'll go into it in a sec and you'll understand. But as I said, they locked him in a room, got him drunk, and sleep deprived him. I wasn't there, but I imagine it looks something like this. And there's a graph with a summary. Don't worry, don't read the graph. It's pretty boring. I've summarised it here for you. And this is what they came out as. 17 hours awake was equivalent to 0.05 BAC. Again, I know there's some art students in the room, so I'll summarise this even further and further. So 2 drinks, equivalent to being up at about 10:30 if you woke up at 5:30 in the morning. And this is really interesting. I saw this and I thought, holy crap! I mean, this is this for me is more than just sort of the transportation industry. This is maybe some rules I should sort of try and live by, or is it? No, it is. It is. But I mean, don't believe me on this, because throughout the night I've been conducting an experiment. I mean, you may not have noticed I've been slowly sipping my cider over there, but since I found out about this talk over the last 2 weeks, I've actually been doing psychomotor vigilance tests of my own to try and determine where I sat at hour 17. The intent right now is to take a psychomotor vigilance test after I've had a drink and a half, let's say 0.05, and prove to you whether or not this is correct. So I sit at about 17 hours, I sit at about 300, a score of 350 on the PVT. What I'll do now for the next 2 minutes is I'll leave you to your drinks. You can cheer me on if you like, and I'll do it on the big screen. As I'll take a PVT and we can work out whether or not the University of New South Wales study was correct. All right, so 351, and that's actually pretty amazing because I was at 350 after 17 hours. I didn't expect that to happen. I thought I'd be much better because I've been speaking and stuff. But yeah, that's I'm pretty proud of that actually. Wow. UNSW, we're correct.
How long have you been awake for?
Now, about 15, 16 hours. But if you look back here, my performance doesn't really change much until about the 16-hour mark. And I've been awake since 5:30 this morning, so it's 8, so 15 hours right now. And that's a really good point. I mean, you need to factor into account even if you are drinking, it's probably even worse if you're drinking. You've been awake for 7 hours. Yeah, look, to summarise, for me, the whole... I was going to have something about a donkey crash in there as well. And for the sake of time, I'll probably talk about it in the questions, but maybe a little factoid now. Does anyone know what does anyone know why 0.05 is the legal driving limit? That's correct. That's when most donkey crashes happen. Well, this is a really interesting thing because I sort of did this and thought, why does 0.05 matter anyway? I mean, is my performance really bad at 0.05? What does that mean? How is 350 necessarily that bad? 0.05, they did a whole bunch of studies back in, and it culminated in a study in 1991, and it was actually they looked at all the road tolls and they compared that to blood alcohol content, and they found 0.05. Actually, if they banned, driving at 0.05, they wipe out 60% of road fatalities. 60% of road fatalities at the time were above 0.05, which was quite interesting. So for me, I mean, the whole thing started with work, and really sort of evolved into kind of a lifestyle thing. I thought there is so much more here than just fatigue management in the transportation and logistics sort of industry. This is really something to live by. So, I mean, lessons for me: sleeping on weekends and don't have a meeting on Monday, and drink, don't drive if you're going to go out. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Yeah.